gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, I thought I would make a boxing video. I made a football video earlier, and a few people said, hey, Dwyer, why don't you hop on and talk boxing? Okay, let me go ahead and ad-lib here for about 10 minutes. Unfortunately, I'm doing this on a Kindle, a tablet that isn't giving me the comments, the chat comments that would allow me to actually respond to chats. I'm new to live. I'm trying to figure it out. Let me just say, today is the first day in a long time that I have checked out the pound for pound list on boxrec.com, boxrec.com. You know, the first thing that leaps out at me are the ages of the fighters, right? Boxing's a young man's game. I understand it takes a lot to get to the top. I get that some of these fighters have had to have been in fights for years to get to the top. But still, it's noteworthy that among, let's say, the top 15, the only guys in their 20s are Shakur Stevenson at 29, at 25, Inoue at 29, and Gervonta Davis at 27. Right, folks? The sport is brutal. I'm just telling you that a lot of the fighters right now on this list are going to have fights where they start to show their age. I believe we just had a fight like that, Canelo against Golovkin. Now, let me say this about the list. They have Golovkin, who I concede is one of the great middleweight champions in history, right? I understand critics will say, hey, part of that reign was with a minor belt. But when you have the knockout streak that Golovkin had and the longevity that Golovkin had, he belongs right next to, in my opinion, Monzon, Hagler, and Hopkins. Let's face it, too. I saw Oscar De La Hoya had some comments where he said, hey, Golovkin isn't close to Hopkins. You know what? I love Bernard Hopkins. The bottom line, though, is Golovkin hit a hell of a lot harder than Bernard Hopkins, right? Dusted off guys early in fights, devastating power, makes for better highlights than Bernard Hopkins. Let's remember, too, that Golovkin was unbeaten for a long period of time. Hopkins, by contrast, lost to Roy Jones, right? I thought Hopkins was having a problem with De La Hoya before stopping De La Hoya on a liver shot, which was unusual for Bernard Hopkins. So while old-timers like to always say that a fighter from the past is better than a fighter from the present, I'm not sure if I would put Bernard Hopkins ahead of Golovkin. Right? Golovkin had a reign, and folks, that reign included KOs. Now, let me say this. They have Canelo ranked number 1 on boxrec.com as the best pound for pound. I'm not going to belabor that point too much. But understand, the guy they have ranked second is Bivol, who beat Canelo. Right? This almost should have an asterisk, where you say Canelo's number 1, but we acknowledge that he lost to the guy ranked number 2. Now, on my personal list, neither Canelo nor Bivol should be ahead of Terence Crawford. Right? Simply put, Canelo has 2 losses, officially. 2. That's 2 more than Crawford has. Right? Crawford, like Canelo, was undisputed in a weight class. Right? The fact that Crawford has moved up in weight and has belts in a new weight class and is still unbeaten right, should to me give Crawford the edge. Also, in terms of boxing ability, right, I believe all of us have things we like to look at and we focus on them, right? We're all biased. My bias has Terence Crawford at the top because understand, Crawford's ambidextrous, something Canelo is not, right? Crawford also is a premier knockout puncher. In other words, Canelo is too. But understand, I can't say that Canelo is a better closer than Terence Crawford, right? I believe one of the things that hurts Crawford is the fact that he has a low-key personality, right? We associate knockout punchers with a Mike Tyson persona, right? It's hard for us to realize that a soft-spoken guy, a Lennox Lewis, is also a closer. Let me say this too. You know, again, I love BoxRec. What's Golovkin doing ranked ahead of Alexander Usyk? Folks, Usyk, undisputed. I believe the guys who are undisputed need more credit on this list, right? You mean to tell me someone's ahead of Terence Crawford, who was undisputed and who's still unbeaten? You mean to tell me they placed Golovkin ahead of Usyk, who was undisputed and is still unbeaten? How's that possible? Let me add another thing, right? I understand many people out there feel that I have something against Anthony Joshua, right? Well, let me just say this. Understand at different times, people will swear that I have something against other fighters, right? I used to hear that I was anti-Canelo. It's the fighters with talent, right? The Joshua, the Canelos, who we focus on and dissect, right? The fact that we're paying attention to Canelo and Anthony Joshua should let you know by itself that the guy's extremely talented. But I'd like for someone to explain to me how BoxRec could have Joshua, who has 3 losses, right, who got stopped in a fight, the Ruiz fight. How could BoxRec have AJ ahead of Errol Spence, who's unbeaten? Inoue, who's unbeaten. Guys, understand, Spence and Inoue have been around the game a long time. They've fought a lot of very high-quality opposition. I understand we tend to fixate on heavyweights, and I get that the heavyweight division drowns out the rest of the room. But make no mistake, as talented as Anthony Joshua is, right, Errol Spence is a closer as well, right? Errol Spence, if he beats Terence Crawford, will be at the top of the welterweight division. There's always some young guy out there, Boots Ennis, I hear you, right? Let me point out, by the way, that looking at this list, they don't even have Boots Ennis on the list, right? At least not the top 25, right? They have people like Jay Opetaya on the list, but not Boots Ennis, right? Virgil Ortiz, another guy who I would say is more talented than some of the guys on this list, right? But Errol Spence is a different generation than Boots. They're just a few years apart, but a few years means a lot in boxing, especially at the welterweight division, right? Errol Spence is more singular than Anthony Joshua, right? Joshua is very talented. Joshua has some great highlights, right? I can't say that Joshua has fought more quality heavyweights than Errol Spence has fought welterweights. Right, let's go down this list a little bit further. Now, I'm a bit surprised that everyone's talking about Ryan Garcia as if he's the second coming. Right? I don't want to get too controversial here. But if you're going to tell me that Ryan Garcia is going to face Gervonta Davis at 135 pounds, and I get that Garcia is now weighing a little bit more than that. But at 135, I'm taking Davis in that fight. Right, folks? Davis hits as hard, pound for pound, as anybody in that weight range. Also, Davis really is getting better and better. This is the guy with the big punch who is figuring out the sport. Right now, Davis is shorter than Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia stands a bit upright. Right? I'm not sure how Ryan Garcia's body survives a Gervonta Davis attack. Right? Garcia also strikes me as a bit unorthodox. Okay, you know, the great ones are always different, as Bill Russell used to say. But I would argue that Ryan Garcia has defensive lapses because he's a slugger, because he's able to get you out of there. He has developed some bad habits. Right? If that fight is ever announced, Ryan Garcia against Gervonta Davis, I'll be taking Davis in that fight. It's just the way it is, right? I think Davis being shorter, if he crouches, I'm not sure what Ryan Garcia can do to hit his body, right? Davis, as big as his left hand is actually two-handed, right? Let me say this too. There are some fights where Davis looks distracted. Right? The Mario Barrios fight where Floyd Mayweather had to say, hey, player, what are you doing? we're getting into the later rounds. You need to step on the gas. This guy might be outboxing you. Right? I'll agree. Davis at times gets a little distracted. I don't think he would be distracted against Ryan Garcia because Garcia is a knockout puncher. Garcia is going to force you to pay attention. A Gervonta Davis who's paying attention is a dangerous fighter. I'm not sure if Ryan Garcia is ready to deal with that level of southpaw. Right? That would be a big step up from Garcia's last fight against Javier Fortuna. Right? Let me mention a few other things looking at this list. I'm very happy to see Ray Vargas on the list. Right? Ray Vargas is a name you need to know. Right? Ray Vargas, it's a little unfortunate that a guy is 36-0 and BoxRec thinks there are 18 guys who are better than him pound for pound. Right? Vargas is very hard to deal with because he throws punches and they're unorthodox. They're a little bit on a loop. And he hits very hard. Right? Let me say, too, I'm sure there's some political reason here why BoxRec has enlisted Tyson Fury. Now, I think Tyson Fury is going to have a hell of a hard time against Usyk. I believe Usyk has picked his opponents carefully. The Usyk-Derek Chisora fight at heavyweight was a very important fight. By the way, an argument can be made that of the heavyweights Usyk has fought, it's Derek Chisora who challenged him the most. Right? I know that's not the way a lot of people see it. I'm not saying Derek Chisora is better than Anthony Joshua. But what I am saying is, from the first round, Derek Chisora is going to be in your face. Now, Usyk's team seems to be methodical. I believe Usyk understands that Tyson Fury cannot beat him, and I know this is a controversial opinion. Tyson Fury cannot beat Usyk on his back foot. Fury's going to have to give away his height, and he's going to have to crash the pocket. Now, we've seen him do that very well against Otto Wallin and against Deontay Wilder. That third fight is interesting. He makes sure he's so close to Wilder that Wilder can't extend his right arm, right? That's after, of course, Fury hit the canvas twice. I believe that Fury is going to go after Usyk. Just understand that Usyk has already survived Derek Chisora, right? Understand who Chisora was. The bell sounded. He was fighting Joseph Parker, who's underrated. I'm expecting Parker to beat Joe Joyce, right? And Parker ends up on the canvas, right? Chisora comes at you. I believe Usyk is going to be prepared for Tyson Fury. That fight is an odds play. By that I mean, you look at it and you say, this fight could go either way, right? Could go either way. Where do I get the better odds? How do I structure the fight? Structure the bets so that I'm covered, right? I don't believe the trash talk. I think Tyson Fury knows better. Tyson Fury's a boxing historian. He knows better than to really believe that Usyk is a middleweight. I believe Tyson Fury himself knows, and I keep mentioning the fight. We're going to keep mentioning the fight. That Steve Cunningham gave him a lot of problems. Quite frankly, the Otto Wallin fight. Wallin was the better athlete than Fury, and you saw that Fury understood that. So he had to charge at Otto Wallin. I think Usyk is going to be prepared for the charges. I think that's a difficult fight, much more difficult than the public believes. Right? Let me close with this. I believe Devin Haney has shown us that he is going to dominate George Kambosos in the rematch. Right? I believe 135 is a must watch because apart from Gervonta Davis, heavy hitting southpaw, you have one of the great fighters of our time, Lomachenko. I know Teofimo Lopez beat Lomachenko. That hasn't convinced me that anybody else can at 135. So you have Shakur Stevenson, right? Very good southpaw, right? I need for people to look at these weight classes with a lot of southpaws, right? Stevenson is smooth. But does Stevenson hit hard enough to dissuade a Gervonta Davis, to dissuade a Ryan Garcia? Folks, I don't have the answers to these questions. Right? Devin Haney, does he hit hard enough to dissuade the guys I just named? Also, the thing with Loma is Loma's ambidextrous. So if he's fighting a Stevenson, and I understand, Stevenson wants to fight Loma, right? If he's fighting a Stevenson, is he going to find a way to frustrate Stevenson, who needs space. Let me also say, too, that I'm not fully convinced that Stevenson beats Robeson Canseco. Now, I understand that fight's happening in Jersey, right? In Stevenson's backyard. A lot of people are saying, who's Robeson Canseco, right? Olympic gold medalist, by the way. That fight is a must-watch. I almost don't care how the judges score that fight. Well, actually I do, because I have some money on Canseco and I got huge odds on it, like 10-1 or something close to that. What I want to see is who actually wins the fight. Because Canseco moves well, just like Loma does. If I see Stevenson having a problem with the movement in the Canseco fight, if that fight is closer than the judges' scorecards, then I'm going to reach the conclusion that Stevenson is not ready for Lomachenko. By contrast, if Stevenson comes out, and I understand the guys have sparred before, if Stevenson comes out and somehow cuts down Canseco's movement and is able to land big shots and to scare Canseco away from the pocket, then he'll have a chance against Lomachenko. Let me point out that in boxing, everyone here should think for themselves. I'm mentioning Lomachenko, just understand that BoxRec, and maybe there's a reason for this, maybe they have some mathematical criteria they're going by or something like that. But just understand, on my personal list, Lomachenko is one of the very best in the sport. On BoxRec right now, if you look at the pound-for-pound best, they don't have him listed in the top 25. Right? I'm going to leave you with that thought. That's why the sport is so interesting. If I were to go into a pub and I were to sit down and we were to be talking about boxing and we were to talk about a short list of the best in the sport pound for pound, I wouldn't put Bivol above Terence Crawford. But yet BoxRec is. I would have Lomachenko on my list as the best in the sport pound for pound. BoxRec doesn't. Right? You know, I respect Anthony Joshua. I view him as a work in progress. I don't place him as having the same level of dominance as an unbeaten Errol Spence. But yet on BoxRec, he's ranked ahead of Errol Spence. That's why the boxing community on YouTube, right, all the people making boxing videos on YouTube have an audience, because this sport is really rock, paper, scissors, right? You think to yourself, oh yeah, of course, Lomachenko is one of the best in the sport pound for pound, right? You know, you could see him lose a close match to Teofimo Lopez, and you can say to yourself, okay, well, he lost this one, but he's still one of the best. I would take him against this group of fighters, and others will disagree with you. And they'll have numbers on their side. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Next time I do a live video, and it'll be a while from now. Next time I do a live video, I'll make sure that the setup I have allows me to read the chats as I do the video. Okay, I apologize for not being organized enough today. Thanks for stopping by.